Right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. I am Stephanie Pedrosa, Senior Marketing Manager at Origo Software Technologies. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today in Origo's webinar series. Origo has been hosting educational webinars for over a year, so we thank you all for your continued support, and we really hope you find these webinars beneficial. A little bit about Origo: we've been helping capital owners manage their infrastructure programs for almost 2 decades now. And in today's webinar, we will discuss a topic that can make a big difference in how efficient your capital program delivery can be. Sometimes the data between your design, construction, and finance team isn't always in sync. So today, industry leaders will share how to make better decisions and accelerate your capital program delivery by breaking down data silos. A few quick notes before we get started. The webinar is recorded, and we will provide all registered participants with the recording. The slides will also be provided to all registered participants. If throughout the webinar you have any questions, please feel free to submit them via the Q&A chat box, and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. If we don't answer all questions during the available time, we will follow up with you via email. And joining me today is my colleague and marketing director, Richard Kramer, who will be moderating today's webinar. Hello, Richard.
Afternoon, Stephanie.
Awesome. And before we get started, we're going to launch a quick poll question just to get to know who's in our audience. So which of the following best describes your organization? Are you parts of roads and bridges, water and wastewater, transit, broadband, electric, green energy, or other? So if you can please take some time and answer those questions.
Yeah. If you work for a Department of Transportation, either at the state or municipal level, you can put roads and bridges, seeing as we're highways, roads, bridges. We're guessing that's the bulk of what you do there.
So we're going to give it a couple more seconds. It looks like a couple of people are trickling in. All right, let's see the results. Okay, so it looks like the majority are in roads and bridges, so that's pretty exciting. Interesting. All right, and the next question, which of the following best describes your role? Are you a project manager? Are you in capital planning and finance, engineering, consultant, administration, or other? So you can take some time and answer that question.
If you're in a leader or an executive kind of role, feel free to put administration. That's what we usually, or however you identify yourself, but administration is usually what folks put for that.
Give it a couple more minutes. It seems like we have like 2 more people coming in. All right. And let's push the results. Oh, wow. A lot of good chunk of project managers, a lot of engineers.
It's a nice mix.
Yeah, a nice mix of people. Well, thank you all and welcome. And now I'm really excited to introduce our panel of experts. So joining us today for this webinar, we have Tim Pratt, who's the former technology manager at the City of Lincoln with 40 years of experience in state and local government agencies, selecting, implementing, supporting, and enhancing numerous solutions. These include enterprise content management systems, CAD modeling applications, GIS, and capital improvement project support systems. He has worked as a designer, project manager, and administrator for many public infrastructure projects where his area of emphasis was organizational structure and management. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Not that anybody really probably cares too much, but the background I chose today, I just keep thinking about our fellow critical infrastructure support people down in Florida and other areas affected. Everybody just keep them in your thoughts and prayers.
No, yes, 100%. Thank you so much, Tim. And next we have David Woolridge, who is the former CIO for the Nevada Department of Transportation with over 25 years of experience in civil engineering and government industries, As an avid information technology professional, he is keen on delivering technology-empowered solutions, strategic planning, engineering, and project management capabilities to the organizations he serves. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Now I'll hand it over to Richard.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. So a very warm welcome from me to everyone in our audience. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. This topic of data silos is one that comes up with our customers all the time. In fact, I'd say one of the key reasons folks often start talking to an enterprise solution provider like Origo is to help them just organize their data and all the associated workflows that go along with it. And the reason for this is it's very simple. Capital programs are complicated. So even on a single project, you can be generating, thousands of requests and approvals and clarifications and plans, changes, and on and on. And so when you multiply that by, having many projects being executed by multiple different teams, it can really slow down your program delivery if you don't have an easy way to access the data that you need, and you end up spending a lot of time sort of hunting for the right data. So I'm very excited to hear from our two experts today who have firsthand experience in solving this problem for public agencies. And so we're going to talk about, what they've seen around data silos, what the impacts are, and how best to overcome the issues that it causes. So let's dive right in. And I wanted to start with you, Tim. Give us your overview of this topic and how what you've seen in your career. Why is this an issue for agencies? How does it happen? How would you summarize the issue in the public sector infrastructure and facilities in the U.S.?
Well, thank you, Richard. Frankly, I am absolutely convinced that every person that comes in the door to work each day wants to do the absolute best job in efficient manner and deliver the products and services that are vital to our survival. With that said, typically what I've encountered is kind of a multi-pronged issue. Most organizations have adopted workflows that evolved over the years. I've seen many where, there's one key person that always does the thing, whatever that function is. And many times these people are creating little data silos. The hardest thing for a institution to do is to get a hold of the different functions that they have and where that data is going. In my tenure with Lincoln, for example, I had two different opportunities where we moved our data storage, or silo, if you will, from Novell to Windows file storage. So, we had to do a complete audit. And why do we have this stuff? And who decided this is the way we were going to look at it? And then again, as we were moving from Windows file storage over to team-oriented or organized storage, one of the things is just a small example of the kinds of data silos that organizations find. I actually found the same thing in a big DOT last week where I was. This example was very innocent. We had a need for our support staff to basically invite people that had retired from this organization to, retirement parties. So somebody got the great idea that they would just take a copy of the personnel database, slam it down in an Access database and protect it, of course, and have it on the file server that everybody, key staff could access because they had the one-word password. So when I ran across this in our first data migration, I was like, what in the world? It's an example of people wanting to do the right thing, but not having the correct tool to do it in. basically, it's a workflow issue to me.
Yeah, and I love the point about the legacy systems. With city or a state level entity, as it goes through year after year of operations, you'll find these things that just sort of hang around for years. That sometimes you need to come up for air and think about why those things exist in the first place. I do hear that a lot. David, same question for you. So you've operated for a long time with a state level entity in Nevada dealing with this kind of stuff. How would you frame the problem up for us?
I think Tim was on the right track too. I think over time, just these systems grow organically. People have a need, and they look at technology to help address that need, and over time, we grow these siloed systems, and then we recognize that there's a need to interface those. We need data from this system over to this system, and I think the time when people really start to think about addressing that is when folks are getting ready to retire, and somebody's been sitting on this system for a really long time. It works. It's getting the job done for them. They're getting ready to leave, and now there's this big knowledge gap, and what are we going to do with that knowledge gap, and how do we fill that, and how do we, as an organization, share that knowledge down to new people coming in, and the younger generation of folks coming into the organization. So, I think Tim was right. Everybody's coming in, they're trying to do a good job, they're trying to do the best job they possibly can, and when you've got a small siloed system, it's easy to understand, it's easy to manage. When you start looking at these larger enterprise systems where there's handoffs between different groups within the organization, it's harder. It's harder to coordinate. It's harder to make changes. It can be a challenge, but I think the benefits far outweigh the challenges that we see from an IT organization trying to manage these siloed systems, the interfaces between the systems, because over time they just keep getting more and more complicated. And I think anybody who's tried to integrate a modern ERP with a legacy project management type system would understand that. And so I don't know, it's just silos, they work. I'm trying to be nice about this. People they're really comfortable with their system and their processes. And trying to break those down and break those silos down and go to these larger enterprise cloud hosted solutions is a challenge, but really the benefits are huge. And I think we saw some of that during COVID when people had to go home, the state, our networks are so locked down and secure. They had a hard time accessing their systems. But with some of these cloud hosted systems, it's a publicly available website that they can go to. And so we saw that flexibility and ability to let people work from home to continue to deliver our programs was really beneficial during COVID. So just a couple thoughts there.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that surprised me a little bit about when I got into the public sector and capital programs a while back now was what you said about retirement, that often folks will start talking to us because there's actually an imminent retirement. And for some reason, I always thought it would be the other way around. That people would be like, no, let me retire, leave it alone for the next person to deal with. And you do see that sometimes, but I would say more often you actually see folks wanting to make a change and sort of get their house in order before they head out. So, it's just interesting what'll sometimes push folks to, as I said, come up for air and think about changing things, because you do have that when we talk to individuals at some of our customer organizations who you guys should know, talk about how difficult it can be to handle that change management aspect of it. Because when you're dealing with a big public sector program, one thing you don't want to do is take on additional risk. You want to do things in an orderly fashion. So sometimes you got to walk that line between those two things. But I think that's a good segue to chat about sort of capital planning and capital programs, and specifically. So what have you gentlemen seen in terms of? So the example we gave here is that sometimes finance and folks doing the programming and the funding of the program the data is not in sync with what actually happens on the ground and what the engineering team has. And this is probably, you know, the biggest example of two silos that we see in our space. Yeah, David, back to you. Like, can you maybe give specific examples of the kind of things you've seen that cause problems when it comes to data silos?
Yeah, I mean, one really good example. It's not super related to capital planning, but you know, everything that DOT does is based on a linear referencing system. So it's the route and the milepost. All of our contracts are tied to, you know, a route number and a start milepost, end milepost. Up until about 2 years ago, we had 3 different linear referencing systems. So you really had to, ask, you know, which one. Yeah, which one is this on? So all of our, you know, crash and safety data was tied to one linear referencing system. All of our pavement data was tied to another one, and contracts, agreements, and all that stuff were tied to yet another one. So it made it difficult, and trying to translate between, you know, a contract going out for you know, some paving job. How do we get that data over to the pavement management people in their linear referencing system so they can track what happened with this, you know, this contract? And so that was a challenge. And then, you know, just those handoffs between, you know, that process of planning your capital program and getting that to an actual, you know, the engineering stages, getting it out to a contract. It's hard because it's multiple different systems that we're trying to, you know, we're planning over here in this system. You know, these are the upcoming projects we're going to do. Engineers are coming in and saying these are the bid items that we need to bid on, trying to get that out to a contract. And that was a very broken process. And then, you know, obviously with the federal financial stuff, you know, financial management was hugely important. You know, without them, we don't get any of the money. We don't get the federal reimbursements and things. So making sure that we can tie all that stuff together, interface with the feds, and, you know, get our reimbursements in a timely manner so we can continue to deliver our program. It was a challenge, and being able to pull all of that stuff into one platform is huge. And it's just some natural, logical workflows where you can go from planning all the way out through a construction project.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually reminds me of an article I read with another one of our customers, Utah DOT, and the director over there was talking about how the vision is really to move to sounds ambitious, a single sort of digital file or digital pathway from when a project is really first proposed all the way through, you know, getting into a program, going through design, and then ultimately what was built, and be able to trace that all the way from idea to, you know, now it's an operating asset. And when you have folks being able to draw from that same data set, it really just sort of clears out any confusion that you might have. Tim, what about you? What did you see in your experience in terms of how these data silos can actually affect program delivery at the end of the day?
Sure. This year, excuse me, I've had the opportunity to kind of work with a little over 30 smaller cities, kind of proposing, you know, a computer managed project management system like Arrigo. And it's interesting, they have all the same issues except the numbers are smaller. They don't have visibility into their processes. They're not sure who's doing what, where, when. So, you know, again, my soapbox is always workflow. But there are a couple of key things that are consideration, and this is even an issue in Lincoln, Nebraska today, simply because they had an older finance system that is getting swapped out. But several integration points. One that is vital is integration with the finance system or the system of record. Products like Arrigo, Masterworks, they are excellent construction management tools, and they'll provide you that insight and reporting, the dashboarding, you know, the notices, hey, you've got these things to do. But some of that has to be driven by good current finance information. You know, a simple thing like a change order today in the city of Lincoln, because they do not have those integrated. A change order gets processed in Masterworks and goes to a point where then it goes off to be approved. And sometimes the lag between getting actual, hey, yeah, this is actually approved and in the finance system, and getting that reflected manually in Arrigo is such a killer. That's just a small example, but you'd also have, changes of time, of course, quantities. It just slows everything down, and it can make errors. How many times has somebody wanted to put 100 and hit 1,000? Maybe I'm just a bad typer, but having these systems fully integrated will take care of the accessibility of data and visibility. There is no reason in the kind of data and systems we have today that a PM can't instantly look at a financial report and see where he is at. It can even show outstanding change orders, linking anything that you did on quantity, additional quantities was resulted in a change order. So they're very kind of disciplined in that way, but I have seen a lot of places that are much more flexible. And, for smaller cities or bigger cities, it didn't matter whether a mayor had to approve the change order or the contract, or if it's a city manager. It's just kind of a universal problem that if you don't have these systems integrated, you can't be as productive.
Yep. Absolutely. That's my experience as well. One thing I heard once from a finance team was, and I'll explain. They were sort of blaming the engineering crowd. They would say, hey, the engineering crowd, they don't anticipate. They always look backwards. It's always like looking in the rearview mirror, and their data is like 30 days out of date. And we need them to anticipate better. And the engineers turned around and said, yeah, but that's the data you're giving us. We're asking you for that data, and you're taking 30 days to send it back to us. That always sort of stuck with me, that they were arguing over. They didn't even realize what the real issue was. They just weren't in sync with real time data. Very good. So let's move on and talk a little bit about how. So then, given that that's the issue. How should agencies, if you say you're an executive director or what have you, how should you be looking to leverage your CIO or your IT department to really help you solve this problem? At what point should they be involved? Who should they be involved with? And so on. And Tim, I'll start with you.
Well, number one, in today's world, IT is just so complicated. Every vendor we talk to, every owner, operator that we talk to, security is a great concern. Of those 30 cities that I talked to this last year, there wasn't a one of them that really wanted to talk about, ISO whatever, or this certification, FedRAMP, and all this stuff. They just basically kind of wanted to take the bucket, if you will, of IT and say, well, our IT department will handle that. And they have to, because they have the rights. They have, there's just a real discipline that's employed in a true technology environment today. So they have to be partners in this. And, the real magic to the engineering portion is the actual implementation, not so much the technology of it, but what does it look like? How do my people use it in the field? And again, the workflow. CIOs can absolutely be vital in working with folks like your GIS team, whoever that may be, is typically not just part of engineering, and your finance department to get to say, yeah, it's okay to do an integration, and maybe some of those you have to start with a one-way integration, and maybe earn their trust and earn their, and demonstrate the value. That's kind of where we're at today. One of the things that recently I've encountered was a place where a CIO wanted to handle like all of the user management for Masterworks. And while it's not huge, but I understand, IT organizations manage users. And I think that's one thing where, at some point in time, we're going to have to develop this process where, if it's securing the environment, great, IT has that. But, like maybe, Tim Pratt is a project inspector and he needs rights to this project. Maybe that can be done on a separate level. But CIOs and IT just absolutely vital.
Yeah, and I agree. It all comes back to it's workflow. I'll sing that mantra all day long. Which is why it can be tough. It can be tough to go through this and make a big a change. It's not easy, and it's because you're changing the way people work, and you're sort of trying to get consistency across the organization, sort of independent of the individuals involved. What is the best practice? What is the consistent process that you want to follow in order to get the best results? So, David, same question to you. You're a former CIO of Nevada DOT. How did you see your role ultimately in delivering that capital program as a CIO?
It was difficult, honestly. I think the way the organization was made up in Nevada, my position was too far removed from the executive leadership team. I honestly think that the DOTs, I know a few have done it, but more DOTs need to have that chief information officer at the executive leadership team level that's there listening to those conversations in all the meetings, understanding, the challenges that they're facing, and then they can bring a different perspective to how to address those challenges. I think, and this is primarily based on my experience in Nevada, but the leadership there are very, very good tactical leaders. You throw a problem at it, they're going to solve it. They're engineers. They were, came up for the most part, engineers came up through that, problem solving, skills in life, and they know the DOT business very, very well. They're not really good technology people, so they don't always understand how they could leverage technology to deliver a better program. And I think putting that CIO in that executive leadership team, not that I wanted to be in all their meetings and all that stuff, but I think elevating that role, and it doesn't even have to be an IT person. I think it just has to be somebody that understands the business of the DOT, is not afraid of leveraging technology to accomplish some of those missions. I think it can help that leadership team shift from a tactical team to a more strategic team. You can start being a little bit more strategic about how you deliver your programs when you leverage technology. We talked about the workflows and how things go from planning all the way through to construction. I mean, that was always, for me, I would see our STIP, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. I would see that STIP, and then always wondered, when is that going to get built? What is the planning? What is that time frame from planning all the way through to construction? And we couldn't match that stuff up. So having a good system that has some good workflows in it, can help tell our story. So we had a transportation board, and sometimes the board it's political. It's the governor, lieutenant governor. It's a political group, and they'll come in and want projects, and we don't have the data to say, it's a hard decision. Yes, we understand you need that project, but there's other needs over here. Board, here's the data to support that decision. If you want us to change it, that's fine. But then you can put that back on that board, but you have to have the data to support it. And that's where I think having that CIO in there that can kind of think those things through and assist in streamlining these processes, making sure that we have good data, the data's available, it's accurate data. We can tell the same story every day. Another kind of funny story, we had a big bridge that we built in northern Nevada. One of our deputy directors jokingly one day said, if I asked 3 different people what it cost to build that bridge, I'd get 3 different answers. Mm-hmm. And that's nobody's fault. It's just it depended on who he was asking and where they were pulling that data from. So understanding that those are, those are like little tidbits I would get when I would be in meetings with them. It's like, all right, so we don't have a system that really says, this is what this costs. We can't just take a project and say, this is exactly what it costs. And my boss was the head of financial management, and she would argue that, yeah, I can tell you what it costs, but that was in her system. The construction guys are going to give you a different number. So that's, being able to get to that point where we have a single source of truth, and it's the source that we all use, and we're confident in the numbers is huge. And having that CIO in those conversations with you will help you get there.
David, you mentioned something that I kind of heard is administrative or executive sponsorship. One of the most powerful examples that I had the pleasure of encountering was a director that absolutely sat down and looked at the workflows and would question, why my boss at the time was in the approval process. He'd always been in the approval process, right. 30 years. And you basically, because she had the ability and understood the technology, that approval was changed to just an email saying, hey, this is moving forward. He wasn't adding additional value. It wasn't a legal requirement. I thought that was really a good example of, again, getting somebody at that top that understands IT.
Well, and at least questions it. And I sent a lot of people through Lean Six Sigma training, mostly for the lean, the aspects of it, but to really, dig into the processes and ask the questions. Why do we do this at this step? I mean, what's the value add here? And that's, I don't know, with the instructor of that class had a good line. He said, why automate waste? We can automate it, but why automate waste? So, I just think, I would challenge people to start thinking about how did they get that CIO voice, at least at that executive leadership team level, and start trying to leverage what IT can really bring in efficiencies and truth.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the information age, so you've got to prioritize that. Otherwise, you're not going to improve. That story of the 3 different prices for the bridge, one of the best moments in my career actually was it was a large school district in Oregon, and we'd implemented them, and then the sponsor, the head of the construction program over there, came and spoke at a conference of ours about they've been using it for maybe 12 months or so, and in his presentation on the things, he said something to the effect of, we no longer spend time arguing over what the data is. So previously we would spend a long time just arguing, well, is that actually correct? Or is it this? What actually happened? Go back and look at this. Go back and look at this. And now we can actually argue about what to do. And that was a big difference. It really just summarized what I think a lot of the benefits are. You can kind of cut through the clutter and then get to the deciding what to do next much faster. And that cuts out a lot of the frustration as well, I think. Very good. Folks in the audience, we have one more slide to go here. Please keep your questions coming in. If you have any questions for David or Tim, now's the time to use that Q&A box and put them in there. So let's talk about, in addition to, leveraging, having a strong information discipline internally to the organization. What should you be looking for outside of the organization? So either, it could be an IT consultant, or it could be just a process consultant or general business consulting. What should you be looking for in a vendor to really get the most out of that relationship? And I'll start with you again, David.
I think you hit it, is that relationship. I always went into projects as it's not a business transaction, it's a business relationship. Making sure that our success is your success. So both of us, it's a mutual benefit, and so find a company that's gonna be there to support you, gonna be there that really cares about your program, really cares about you delivering a solid program. things aren't always going to go as planned. So you need to have a good relationship. I mean, I hate to say it's like a marriage, but it can be. You know, there's give and take. I mean, there's always going to be some give and take in these bigger projects, and things aren't always going to go your way, and things aren't always going to go the vendor's way. And so really, you know, find somebody that's going to be around, that's going to be here long term, that understands what you do as an organization. You know, a health and human services department is completely different than a DOT, and what we do is different. So make sure that you're working with a vendor that has some capital planning experience. You know, they've done this before. It's not just checking boxes and making sure you went through that scope of work and delivered everything that's on that thing. You know, a company that's going to grow and change with the times as you know, we get new federal requirements, we get new state requirements. Make sure you have a product that can pivot and work with you, that you can get in there and make those incremental changes when you get a new requirement for bids. You know, you have to score bids differently. You need to be able to get in there and make that change, and you need to have that vendor that's there with you all the time. I think that's the key. It's about that. Just make sure you have a good, solid relationship.
Tim, what about you in your experience? Like, what are the things that you look for? Or any red flags that you would spot when you're evaluating a vendor and who to work with long term, like David was saying?
Well, you know, obviously, I think David did a great job kind of going over the key essentials. From my standpoint, I always try to look for even the companies that I liked, where they were struggling, and try to reach out and talk to some of those folks. Because what I'm looking for is, you know, first of all, it's some major issue. Generally, it's never a major issue in public work or even private sector. It's not hard to buy software. You know, it's something IT or organizations can do easily. The tough part is implementing it. And most organizations will kind of instill, you know, handcuffs on themselves of how they're going to implement a software. And it's interesting to kind of hear both sides. You know, you can always get a reference to someone that's good, but what I really do is look for someone that's having some struggles and how they feel that vendor is working with them. You know, success, in my mind, in this industry is always temporary. There's always some issue. But what I'm really looking for is a vendor that comes to the table with the attitude that we are partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think on the technology side of things, you know, the days of building your own stuff in your own data center are long gone. You know, there's very few reasons, in my opinion, to really need to stand up and manage and support your own infrastructure. I wouldn't do anything anymore on-prem unless I had to. You know, there's so many good cloud offerings out there, and just like I touched on earlier with the whole COVID, you know, going home, working from home. You know, honestly, we've completely changed how we work at the Nevada DOT and how we recruit and everything. It's given us a lot of opportunities to hire some people that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to hire. So we've gotten some better team members. We're way more efficient having these cloud hosted systems. You know, the DOT's heavy field workforce. You know, the guys are out in the field all day long, and giving them access to data and systems from the cab of their vehicle instead of having to go back to the office to find a contract or a set of plans or whatever. It's huge. So I would really look at that, you know, that cloud hosted, available anywhere, anytime type of solution too when you're looking at the technical side of things.
Yeah, I've been in this industry long enough to remember when it was the other way around. You know, I mean, you spoke to folks about a software as a service or cloud-based software service, and yeah, the attitude was sort of more standoffish. Certainly, it was like, hey, that's new. We've got to go on-prem. Now it's the opposite, like you said. I think, it is sort of hard to advocate for an on-prem solution now unless you have some really peculiar requirement, I guess.
I was that guy 10 years ago. So I was like, cloud, man, I don't know about cloud. But today, it's
look at us now, yeah.
Yeah, and you look at all the APIs and different abilities to interface different systems. Cloud to cloud, cloud to on-prem. It's just easy now, where it didn't used to be so easy. So
yeah, and there's been advances in security and things as well. Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think part of the maturation process that's happened, how many times have you been in IT for a while? Have you heard, oh, data is cheap. I can buy a drive and store this and do whatever. We don't really care. But now organizations that are truly looking at things with their eyes wide open, they're understanding how valuable and how expensive and how valuable the information is. It's just so vital to get it out to people.
Yeah. And the other thing I've heard from customers is, it took us a while to realize that we are not a software shop. We build bridges and roads, and that's what we're really good at, and that's what we want to be really good at. And if we can leverage somebody else who has that specialty, that's what we should do. So I think that's why we're seeing what we are in the industry. All right, but thanks, David and Tim. I'm going to hand back to Stephanie for any questions from our audience.
Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box. We have a couple of minutes. So the first question, we talked about getting everyone in sync. How do you ensure that all of your departments are in sync whenever you're trying to break down those silos? And Tim or David, whoever wants to take that question.
I think I'll take the first stab at it, but I honestly think making sure you have to have that single source of truth. So having these different siloed systems really makes it difficult to keep everybody in sync. So when you can collapse all that stuff into one enterprise solution that everybody has access to and everybody sees the same answer, that single source of truth, I think is huge. So that would be my answer. And I'm sure Tim has maybe a different one. But.
Yeah, I don't know that it's different, but I have two versions. The commander in me says, well, we just need the executive sponsorship and we need to force it down their throats, and that rarely really will get you where you want to go. But the way it will work is if you take those people that are big stakeholders, in the change, and give me the ones that are the most against it, and let's go back and gently work through the workflows. Maybe get them to talk a little bit about their pinch points. What is it that they really don't like doing about their job? Let's automate these 3 or 4 things for them as a part of this that, maybe we would do in a phase 2 or 3, but let's see if we can move that up to like phase 1B or something like that. Get those wins for folks so they see the advantage.
Yeah, and it looks like we just have one more question. So when you're adopting a new system, what's the time frame to get all of your data integrated into a single system? How long has it normally taken in your experience?
I'll jump first. I don't think the data integration is the hard part. Mapping, this field in this software to that and doing that's a fairly known quantity. I really think institutions need to look long and hard internally at what their workflow processes are today, how much of that can be changed. I love that phrase about not automating waste, and how much of that they can bite off and get it done. To me, the workflow review is 75–80% of the work. frankly, a lot of institutions don't even have good documentation of their workflow. That can take a couple of years, depending on the size of the organization and how well documented things are now.
Yeah, I think Tim nailed it. The moving the data, integrating the data isn't the hard part. It's the people are the hard part, and getting them to document their process. I think that's the thing that takes the longest is really understanding the process. What are the outcomes you're looking for? What are the business outcomes we're focused on? So if we can back off and we have people that are very good. They know what they do. They don't necessarily always know why they do it. So if we can drill down into the why they do it, what is that result that you're looking for? And we can clean up that process. That's way more difficult than integrating the data. The data's data. This goes to there, like Tim was hitting on. It's just the ETL process. It's pretty straightforward, but one of the things I really, really like, and I think it's going to help government agencies, is these larger enterprise solutions sort of force you to not so much document your process, but I don't know, settle on a process at least, and then the system creates that workflow and that business process for you. And you don't have to worry about that person that's been there for 28 years in the back corner that knows the process, and now they're retiring and now nobody knows the process. We build that into the system. So as I think DOTs and public sector in general, we're seeing more turnover. We don't have the 30-year tenured employees anymore like we used to, and you're losing a lot of that institutional knowledge. And by building those workflows into a system, you're going to kind of capture that institutional knowledge digitally, sort of, so to speak. And integrating the data piece, to me, I don't worry about it. Once you figure out what's the actual true source of data, what's the source of truth, and that's the piece that we're going to pull into the new system. That's simple.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we have another question. So how do you gentlemen see the role of AI in the future of data exchange and data analytics? I don't know who wants to take this. Tim's smiling over there. So
that's a huge question. I've seen some very rudimentary AI implementations. Wow. One of the things that, and this is just a small off-the-cuff thought, that I've seen institutions struggle with a lot is cash flow. And, basically whoever has been in the finance department for so many years, they kind of know that, as a project goes down the road, they're going to need this much money this time and all that. I think AI could really help implement, kind of get that those projections a lot better. And I know that's one little example, but you could look at, definitely in my mind, look at contractor performance, material performance. I think it's unlimited, but from my experience, it's something I just don't have a lot of day-to-day information or usage of.
Yeah, no, I think that's great examples, Tim, especially on the financial side. We actually have a guy that's full-time that's he kind of supposed to predict how much money we're going to have to do projects, and I'd hate that job. That's way too much pressure.
Yes.
But I would love to see AI feed the planning process. Look at data across, your crash data, your safety data, your air quality data, your traffic data, your asset condition data, and use AI to help build your plan, based on the greatest need, to make sure that we're delivering a good program. Our assets are in good condition, that we have safe roads and dependable transit times and things like that. So, but yeah, you had some great examples, Tim, especially on the financial and materials performance and stuff. Would be kind of cool to see.
Well, it looks like those are all the questions for today. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. That was a lot of great information. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we hope you have a great rest of the week. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right, thank you.
everybody.